All right, if we're ready, we will start Community Infrastructure Services. We have one consent item. Does someone want to move that? Councillor Ioannidis, did you have any questions on that one? Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So now we'll move on to item number 2, which is the 2018 Artist in Residence appointment. And Emily Robson is here for a 5-minute presentation. Welcome,
Hi.
Emily.
Thanks. Through the chair, thank you so much for having me here today, and I'm really excited to share with you a recommendation from the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee as well as the Public Art Working Group on the appointment of Suzmera Tazeen Sheikh for the 2018 City of Kitchener Artist in Residence. The Artist in Residence program is entering into its 23rd year and was the first municipal program of its kind. And while there have been several iterations of the program over the years, the core has always remained the same, which is to explore our collective identity, our stories, how they connect, how they diverge through contemporary art making practices. Suzmera's project, and in Suzmera's project, she proposes to work with immigrant women of color to explore their personal journeys here to Canada, both nationally, internationally, and then also their personal experiences here in Kitchener. She works in a variety of disciplines, and for this project, she's proposing to work with the women of color who are new to the country in needlecraft and textile arts. She's also proposing to do interviews with these participants to talk about their history and their personal journeys. These audio components will be compiled into installation for the Berlin Tower Art Space at the culmination of her residency. Suzmera couldn't be here today. She had travel plans that were well underway before her appointment, so she's prepared a short video to talk with you a little bit or to explain a little bit about both her practice and the project.
Honorable Mayor and respected council members, hello to everyone. My apologies for not being there because I had a fixed travel itinerary which was planned way before the announcement of this program. I'm extremely glad and thankful to receive this opportunity as an artist in residence for the City of Kitchener. Thank you very much for appointing me and making me part of the community and to get to know my city in a very different manner. I specialize in South Asian miniature painting, but my practice has been widespread from miniature painting to site-specific work and installation based on sound and video art. And I will be working with immigrant women of color who are also facing domestic violence because of their movement to a new country as an immigrant, and in this struggle they face various problems. I will be doing workshops with them and they will produce artwork with me which will be exhibited in the end of this residency. Once again, I would like to say thank you to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to make this residency a positive experience. Thank you very much, and bye from me for now. Hope to see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
So we're very excited to work with Suzmera to realize her project, and in the next couple of months up until the spring, what we do together in our team is try to figure out kind of a timeline for her project, all of the workshops that she'll be delivering, and do all of that background work so that come the spring, her project and her residency will be in full swing. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily. Councillor Marsh, do you have a question?
I just want to thank you for bringing this forward, and I am prepared to move the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Schneider?
No questions, just comments. It was really exciting seeing this presentation and the Arts and Culture Citizen Advisory Committee too, and to see the excitement and support that this has there as well. So thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Yes, thanks, Ms. Robinson, for your presentation. Just one question. I'm not sure if I missed it in the report, but this is an application process, right? I'm just curious how many people have applied this year and how that relates to other years.
Yes, through the chair. So it's an open call process. So there were 10 submissions through that process, and then our Public Art Working Group acts as the jury for this process, and so reviews those 10 submissions, and then selected Sumaraz as the finalist. Compared to other years, it's a little bit higher than it has been in the past, and a little bit lower than it has been in the past too. So we're usually in the neighborhood of like 7 to 12 or 13.
Okay, sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that we have for you. Is there any comments? It's been moved by Councillor Marsh. I don't see any. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now going to move on to the Community Energy Investment Strategy for Waterloo Region. Is it Carrie or Brandon? You're going to do a brief introduction? Go ahead, Brendan.
Yes, through the chair, we actually have Mr. Dave Rowade here from the region of Waterloo, who is going to do the presentation, and he's going to help us out with some of the discussion or answers to the questions. This is an item that is on the City of Kitchener Corporate Business Plan to be completed by 2018. So with that, over to Dave.
Thank you. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, and good afternoon. So today I will be presenting the final product of 2.5 years of collaboration between the partners you see on the screen here. 9 organizations work together to develop this community energy investment strategy. And specifically, I'll be just giving an overview of the strategy, some of the drivers of what compelled us to develop it, what the strategy aims to achieve, and looking at next steps. So this diagram shows how all the components of the strategy fit together. A lot of them are covered within your report, but essentially the purpose, which is on page 2 of Brandon's report, is the overall focus of the strategy in terms of its intended influence. The goals and objectives, also on the same page, second page of that council report, builds on the purpose by identifying the key outcomes to attain over the next 25 years. The energy opportunities are potential projects that will achieve the goals and objectives, and the actions are those tasks and activities that are needed to facilitate and support implementation and attract investment in those opportunities. The progress indicators are how success will be measured as a result of implementation, and the governance speaks to the roles and responsibilities of those involved in ensuring the strategy meets its goals and objectives, and I can elaborate on that in a bit. And the periodic review is evaluating the progress indicators. We recommend every 3 to 5 years to make sure we're achieving the goals and objectives. So having said that, some of the drivers for strategy development is there's been quite a lot of provincial policy and regulation addressing energy management, land use, and emissions reduction over the last several years. And this influences us as municipalities in terms of development and transportation patterns regarding energy conservation and their requirement in our official plans now to address climate change mitigation and adaptation. However, moving more to the energy planning side, I don't know if you are aware, but every 5 years, the utilities work with the industry or the independent electricity system operator to develop an infrastructure plan, an energy infrastructure plan. The next one is due in 2020. Planning starts this year. Typically, it's an engagement of utilities and the ISO. Area municipalities are kind of on the periphery there, and other community stakeholders could have a potential role, so we're recommending those improvements. So there's more stakeholder engagement involved. There's also the economic development strategy, which recognizes the need to create a green, sustainable, and efficient region that anticipates growth and the Community Climate Action Plan involving GHG emission reduction targets, which was approved by City of Kitchener Council late 2013. So another set of important drivers of what we heard during stakeholder engagement, and for over a year we conducted online and telephone surveys with the public and businesses. We held workshops and met with numerous groups, including several of the advisory committees of the City of Kitchener. And these are the main themes up on the slide there of what we heard. And this influenced the development of goals and objectives, the identification and evaluation of the opportunities, and implementation considerations. So briefly on one of the themes around costs, it's quite significant what this community pays for energy in a given year. We started in 2015, so 2014 was our base year, and all businesses and residences and organizations in the community spent well over $2 billion on electricity, gasoline, diesel, natural gas. And here's the concerning part. When you consider the source, which is mostly imported energy, 87% of those energy expenditures left the community. So there's a huge opportunity there in terms of energy conservation, efficiency of local energy generation, and keeping more of those dollars circulating in the local community. And our CEO of the Economic Development Corporation recognizes that this is a significant opportunity. And I mentioned the Economic Development Strategy, which acknowledges the need for sufficient infrastructure capacity, including power, the cost competitiveness of utilities, as well as supporting the focus on innovation, environment, and targeting new technology employers, such as green energy and clean tech. So the Community Energy Investment Strategy embraces all those and actually moves them forward. So I skip over this because this is the purpose, which is in your report. The goals and objectives are also in the report. Too many objectives to put up front. So it's just the organization of the goals in these 4 areas. And if all 22 opportunities within the strategy were implemented over the next 25 years, we would see about 39% reduction in energy consumption. This would be equal to about $819 million using the 2014 figures. So the final slide in terms of next steps and implementation. You have a staff recommendation for city councils. We're also presenting to Cambridge and Waterloo in a week or two, as well as regional council at the end of the month. We would need to transition the steering committee that's developed the strategy into a governance committee, and we'd need to report back on the administrative resources within the 2019 budget process. But in the interim, we need to deliver this final strategy to the Ministry of Energy. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. A couple questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I guess my one question would be, with the partners that are involved, I see here the 9 partners, what is the commitment from each of the partners? What are, like, besides dollar amounts, are they committing staff, or are they committing, what type of other resources will they be committing besides dollar amounts?
Besides dollar amounts?
Yes.
So the commitment behind the recommendation to transition the steering committee to a governance committee is a continuation of what we've worked on for the last 2.5 years. So representatives from the 3 utilities, the gas utilities and the cities, and we all were a part of that evaluation, that's what's needed. So we did consider, using an existing organization, but we felt that the cities and the region and utilities will be the driving force in oversight.
Okay. And I guess I had a question. I'm going to have to key back in.
Sure. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, David. It's good to see you again. You did a very brief synopsis here, but you did something much more in-depth and had lots of communication with our environmental committee. Just some of the questions that were raised there, I'll just raise them here just so council knows. The concern about there was a recommendation for a presentation to the home builders, which I think you had talked about doing. Has that happened yet?
Yep. Yes, a couple times we met with them last year.
Okay, and the general response, because this is all about the low-impact development, the general response from the Home Builder Association was positive?
I don't know if I'd classify it as positive or negative, but it was largely recognizing the need for assistance to go beyond the building code to build higher energy performance buildings, if that's the case. But there was also a recognized need for additional training for contractors, and engagement or an assistance in developing a market, say for higher energy performance houses like net zero. So interestingly, one developer could sell over 200 net zero or 150 net zero homes in Guelph, but he said here he couldn't do that. The demand wasn't there.
Right. Right, okay, that's, thank you for that. The other one was under goal 4, or sorry, that's goal 3. The reduced, we were talking about increased reliance on active transportation and transit. And I think one of the members raised the question about reducing the rates for transit on specific days, so on days of high heat days or really cold days, that there was some discussion about that. That's something I think, have you included those in your recommendations?
I'll be honest, I don't have that in my notes from that meeting.
Okay.
I did come across that request when I was with Public Health, and we did have a program along those lines, but I think that's outside of the scope immediately of this investment strategy. We were looking at having the buses transition to a zero tailpipe emission technology, for example. So it's looking more at infrastructure investment.
Okay, and that was one of the things that one of the notes that I took, because I pulled my presentation at the Environmental Committee, so that makes sure that some of these things were reiterated. And under goal number 4, you had talked about raising energy literacy, and I think one of the requests was to build in some possible school visits into how we would do that literacy. Then that's something that's probably part of the recommendations, the action plans now?
Yes, I do recall that feedback, and I believe it is part of the grade 5 and or 8 curriculum. I forget which course. But
5 does municipal governance, but they may be doing this as part of their science and social studies, yes.
Yeah, and the point being is that getting into schools is a great way to get into homes as well, because then our children become great advocates to our parents. So it's very clear we need to do a significant energy literacy campaign. In the phone residential survey, only a third of people recognize it as their responsibility to conserve energy at home.
Oh, that's a bit of a disappointing number, isn't it? Because I think it's important for all of us to participate in that. At the appropriate time, I will pass this motion with a few additional comments, just for the record, that Environmental Committee members had.
Okay, Councillor Yunetsky.
In your presentation on your PowerPoint, you made reference in the last 3 or 4 slides about saving of 39%, I think was the figure cost-wise. Oh, that's a 39% reduction in imported energy. Okay. I thought there was a dollar figure because you quickly went right through that. I was trying to read that. So there's no dollar implication put on this, is there?
I actually spoke to it when the slide was up. I realized I breezed through, so I apologize. I did actually calculate it using a similar formula as how we figured out how much was spent in 2014. So if we were to use 2014 dollars, and in 2041 we were in a place where we were using 39% less energy, that would equate to $819 million, again using 2014 dollars.
And I
figured how much the price is going to go up by then.
Yeah, and I figured there's a dollar figure attached to it somehow in terms of a calculation, as you just pointed out. But in that figure that you're saving, 819 million, was it you say?
Per year, yes.
Yep, per year? Okay. I got thinking that the same thing that we have with our water utilities facilities, where would they come and say, well, you got to save, you cut back, water preserving devices, cut back in lawn watering, etc., and we can save water, and that has been the effect. as you go year to year. But on the other hand, the costs of, well, geez, there's not enough money coming in for revenue to the things, we've got to raise the prices. So eventually it balances itself out that even though you make conservation reduce the price, you're still paying more because now they've got to raise the price per unit. Would that be the same type of implication in terms of this energy over the next 20 years or 25 years?
I've heard that mentioned before, and I think that's more the exception than the norm. And it's in the case when you change class of customers. So I think this may occur at the industrial, commercial, or institutional level if they reduce their class. And I don't know what the thresholds of consumption are for the class, but it can change their rates. But if a business puts solar power on the roof and it's called net metered if you use it on site, that just reduces your demand outright. And, you know, it's pretty significant. We have 2 of our regional buildings on net metered, and I can assure you we're saving significantly annually on those. So I think in some cases there may be some rate adjustments. I understand what you're speaking of, but I don't think they're the frequent.
But using that solar example, if you're heating your house with electricity, and then all of a sudden you go to switch to solar power, and then that cuts your cost significantly. Well, it's the hydro people that is all of a sudden going to say, well, we're going to have to raise the rates.
So if you reduce your consumption by 60% and then you have a 10% increase in rates, I'm pretty sure you'll come out ahead. I can't quite hear you, sorry. Pardon?
I can't quite hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
If you reduce your electricity consumption from 50 to 60%, and your rates increase, say, 10%, you would still be out ahead. As I said, I think it's the exception and not the norm that after a major retrofit or upgrade, or in this case, producing energy on site, it would be a rarity that would be the case, that you would pay higher rates and in the end more. I have heard a few businesses talk about that, and I talked to the CEOs of the utilities, and they said that was it, where there was a change in class, a customer class.
Okay. Do I ask you the question, or ask staff, in terms of the explanation or interpretation of net zero residential construction?
What's that?
Now, I know that's referred to in the staff, or staff going to be, do we ask staff questions now or later? I'm not sure who to direct that question to.
But really simply, it's a building or structure that produces as much energy as it needs.
I'm sorry, say it again, I didn't understand that.
It's a facility that produces as much energy as it requires on site. So it doesn't import any energy. And that may be through a combination of on-site electricity generation as well as thermal energy, such as geothermal. So getting heat and cooling from the ground. So if you need, say, 1,000 gigajoules to operate your facility, whether it's a home or a business, and you can create those all on site with the right investments, the strategic investments, and so you have a net zero demand because you're not buying any from the grid or importing any. You're creating it all on site.
Okay, now I understand. That's the future?
I would say it's a few years out, and I think what's interesting is seeing a number of developers who are trying to make sure that there is a business case. It will become more compelling as rates do increase, particularly for natural gas and other fossil fuels. For example, the impact of carbon pricing is expected to affect all energy commodities. So as things like batteries, which are critical in the use of solar power, as those prices come down, that will increase the business case for net zero. So I think it's a nascent demand right now, but is it the future? I would definitely say so, particularly over the next 25 years.
Yeah.
It's expected to be the standard probably by 2030.
Probably when?
The Canadian Home Builders Association estimates net zero will be the standard building code for residences by 2030. So whether it's 2035 or 2025 is anyone's guess, I guess.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. I'm very prepared to support this recommendation. I have a couple questions. First of all, I want to know, what is Sustainable Waterloo Region's involvement or potential future involvement with this going forward?
Going forward, so first of all, they were involved as one of the key stakeholders we engaged in developing the strategy. Going forward, we've already shared our detailed energy modeling because as you may or may not know, this spring they'll be bringing a long-term GHG reduction target to city councils and regional council. So since we already did some of the heavy lifting on the quantification out to 2041, they can use that to propose a deeper GHG reduction target than what we have in this community now. So that's one immediate way. Also looking at either a combination of participation in the governance committee or more likely in championing some of the opportunities we identified in the strategy. That's a role we'll be exploring with them over the next several months. Because I've been asked this question by a number of groups, just as recently as last week by the township CAOs, because Sustainable Water Region and REAP Green Solutions have demonstrated very successful model for community engagement and achieving energy and emission reduction. So we definitely want to harness that power and work with them. So this strategy builds on 5 specific actions of their climate action plan.
Perfect. Okay, good to know. And in our motion here that's before us today, there are additional recommendations that came out of the meeting with our environmental committee, and I'm just wondering if you have any concerns about incorporating those recommendations into the final report.
So point of clarification, are you referring to where the following additional comments from the environmental committee were forwarded?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it exactly.
Brendan, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, just through the chair, my understanding is that when we had the environmental committee and they put forward this recommendation, and in the staff reports on page 3-5 where there's additional comments, those additional comments, we sent them right away to Dave when he was in the process of finalizing it, and those have already been included into the document, or they can be dealt with as part of implementation, because there's 1 or 2 that relate to implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, unless Dave sees otherwise, that we would need to formally amend the actual strategy itself, because it includes many of these things.
I would say I believe we largely have done so. We have revised a number of the opportunities, added 2 or 3 since we consulted with that advisory committee. And as I mentioned before, talking with how we'd work with local advocacy groups such as REAP. We added the advocacy component into the governance committee's responsibility. So I think we presented to them in late November, early December, and we have incorporated that into the final strategy. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. And just a quick comment, if I may. Just so it looks like you're very on point with your assessment that education is required to bring more net zero homes into market locally. So I think that's great, and let's see those educational opportunities, come forward so that we can see more of those being bought and sold here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez, is yours comments?
Yeah, comments with regard to the motion.
Okay. That's all the questions that we have, so thank you very much. Councillor Fernandez, go ahead. Councillor Fernandez is going to go first, and then you. Yeah.
Okay. So the comments from the Environmental Committee were incorporated into the report, so I don't really need to review them. I think that there was really good and sincere conversation around there. Of course, the environmental perspective doesn't always include the financial component and the implications that it will have for municipalities. But nevertheless, I think one of the highlights of that conversation was, can we get there sooner and faster? But with recognizing that there will be a cost to municipalities, and the cost to the municipalities is the cost to the taxpayer. I think some on the Environmental Committee understood that there's that challenge. But I am really happy to see all of the work that's been done here, and the 4 goals I think are attainable goals. We did receive on our desk just a few minutes ago a review from Dennis, I'm going to say it wrong, Ischin, and his conclusion was 2041 is not far away, there's no time to wait. And I can't agree with him more. As we see our heating days increase and the fluctuations in our climate change, yes, we've had those warm January days for many, many years, but they're longer and they're different, and our storms are increasing. The more we can change how we do things, the more we can take a look at reducing our carbon footprint and partnering with the groups like REAP and like Sustainable Waterloo Region, who have done an incredible engagement. I think the faster we'll be able to implement some of these goals and get some of this sort of feet on the ground kind of thing. And that's no pun intended. We could say bikes on the ground too, in terms of transit. Thanks again for all the work that you and your team have done on this.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair Galloway-Seelock. Yeah, thank you for bringing this report forward. It's a rather important issue, and I feel like we've sort of fallen behind, and it's there's no blame to be anywhere to be held. I just think council should have pushed more sooner for to have these initiatives move forward. And my question that I was going to say, but as I looked further in the report, is I'm glad to see that we have Grand River Energy being involved, because that is a partner among all the partners, and it's beneficial that we leverage that relationship for any of the initiatives that we move forward, and look forward to seeing these updates on a regular basis.
Okay, there's no further comments. Recorded vote has been called. And that's carried unanimously with those who are present. All right, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to item number 4, which is the South Kitchener District Park. There is no presentation, so if there's any questions, Denise and Dan and Leon are here to answer any questions. Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, so I find it interesting that we're moving towards, sorry, I just lost my page. We're planning on moving this house, this heritage house, intact, but I'm puzzled as to the suggestion to the use for washrooms, change rooms. Is that the best use of this building? I just feel like we could be using it for an interpretive center, or something where we could do community building or community participation. It just seems like a shame to use a historical house for washrooms and changing.
Go ahead, Mr. Ritz.
Through the chair, if we go back to the original master plan, it did call for an amenity building for washrooms and change rooms. At that point, we hadn't. There wasn't a need for like a community center on the site or another adaptive use like that. So we are moving towards the original intent of the master plan and reusing it for that purpose.
Okay, and so the costing remains pretty much the same as what the original presentation to council was. Is that correct?
Denise?
So through you, Chair, the estimated cost for Alternative 2 is within the range provided, and that's the move intact, is within the range provided previously to Council. The new build is slightly more expensive than the previous cost estimate.
And I mean, I heard not that long ago from the North Waterloo Heritage Group, I'm sure I have that wrong, Conservancy Group, that reuse of a building is better for the environment. So we just talked about the environment than a new build, because the fact that we are using materials that would go to the landfill if demolished, right? How will we recognize the heritage of this building? What will we be doing?
Leon? Hold on one second. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, there has already been discussion about having an interpretive plaque that would explain the history of the site, not only the history of the Scottish settlement and the design physical significance of the actual structure, but also recognition of the Kober family who were residents and occupied that property for quite a number of years.
Okay. What's the timing for the moving of the building, and then how will we preserve it until we are able to do, I mean, I'm sure that there's different stages, right, with the park. There's still there's grading that's happening, so we're going to be moving it, and we won't be using it, preparing it for this use right away. Is that correct?
Yes. So through the chair, you'll see on page 4-3, we do have the schedule for the work. The first step would be preparation of the building, so basically getting it ready for a move. Then we'd be relocating the move in our tender that's coming up. So we're tendering the works for phase 1 right now. That'll include the landscaping of the site, the sports fields, and the move of the building will be incorporated in that phase. At that point, we'll be what's called mothballing the building, basically boarding it up until we have the funds to actually renovate the building, which would be done in the second phase.
Okay. I guess that was, I apologize, I did see the schedule, but it wasn't clicking with how my question was being asked. Yeah. I guess my concern would be sort of, you didn't use the word mothballing the building. That's my word, right? You didn't use that, did you?
Through the chair, I did use that,
okay.
that term. Basically, it means making it safe until we can actually do the renovations.
Yeah, and I think what's important in doing so is the regular surveillance and the regular checking of the building, because, you know, I've seen buildings who've been mothballed and they just deteriorate until you think, well, why did we even try to save it? So that will be on us as a municipality and on our staff to make sure that we keep on top of that.
Correct. That'll be part of the mothballing
period. I'm glad you used it, because I was going to use it as well. Okay, thank you. I think this is it's an interesting way of repurposing a building within a park and within a heritage designated building. So I'd like to move this at the appropriate time.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I want to be clear, just to hold on Councillor Fernandez's question. There isn't going to be another new build structure anywhere near where this proposed location is going to be in the master plan?
So through you, Chair, this amenity building is intended to provide amenity support for the splash pad and playground area, and so that's where the washrooms and the change room facilities come in. In a future stage of the park, there is a significantly larger amenity building associated with indoor sports, and there would be perhaps that community space that was mentioned earlier. But this building is specifically to service the outdoor park needs.
In the budget or in the master plan, what's the difference between when this would be built or completed, and the other facilities you're speaking about? What I'm getting at is I want to ensure that when we looked at the new build, it was in the context of potentially being attached to a structure that's going to be built anyway nearby, and if there's any cost savings in that.
So through you, Chair, it was always contemplated to have an amenity facility outdoors in close proximity to the splash pad. What changed between the master plan and the detailed design was the location of the splash pad feature, requiring movement of the heritage building if we choose to use that as that amenity building. So originally it had been contemplated that the heritage home would be this amenity building. However, it would be sited at its current location. Due to site constraints, the site was reconfigured, hence the need to move the amenity building in close proximity to those elements that require washroom and change room facilities. So
Okay. No, I think I can follow up. We have some time to think about this before council as well, so I'm good for now. Thank you.
I think the gist of it is that if we don't move the building, it will be in the middle of a soccer field. And that was part of the design, when the design came, right? Okay, Councillor Etherington.
Just comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, I will come back to you. I just have one quick question. My question is with respect to the Kober family who came the last time we talked about it. And so I just wanted to check in and see if they were made aware of this report and the recommendation, because they were expressing concerns about the use of.
So through you, Chair, the Kober family is aware of the city's intentions in terms of the amenity building. To my knowledge, I don't believe their feedback in terms of the use has changed. However, the project manager has been working with the Kober family in terms of providing them with materials on site that they would wish to preserve in terms of their own heritage. And so through the contractor and the Kober family, they've received some wood material and some metal sheeting material that was important to them.
Yeah, but they, I think I heard you say is that their opinion hasn't changed since the last time, that they would prefer that their heritage home not be used for a washroom facility?
To my knowledge, that has not changed.
Is it something that staff can endeavor to just connect with them before we deal with this at council?
Certainly.
Just with regards to that aspect. Thank you. Councilor Fernandez, is yours comment? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Bensasson, you're here, so I think it's, in fairness, we should ask your heritage opinion on the adaptive reuse of a building like this. Do you feel that this is something that will reflect well on us as heritage preservers?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I do. I think when we have the opportunity to conserve and adaptively reuse a heritage resource, we should be doing so. Even if that means that resource would be used as a change room and washroom facility. There's a real unique opportunity here because it is a public space, because it is a park and a very large park, that we can tell the story about the property through interpretive plaques and just visually through the design of the structure. So I would believe that this is a unique and good opportunity for the city.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait for my comments until everybody else has.
Okay, that's all the questions that it appears we have at this moment. Councillor Etherington, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that at first glance it seems to be a lot of money to save this building, but I think from a heritage point of view it's well worth the cost. And as I've said before, I believe that as a city we don't do enough to preserve our declining stock of heritage buildings. In this case, I note that to construct the similar size facility, a new facility, it would cost $808,320 compared to the $730,800 it will take to preserve and reuse this building. That's a difference of $77,000 if for the people that I anticipate will criticize this spending. I very much support the preservation and reuse of this heritage building, and I'm certainly prepared to justify the cost if I'm asked about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Yunetsky?
In regard to the heritage component of this particular facility, I'm glad to see that it will be preserved as opposed to be demolished or whatever. Being in good condition, that provides it as a good candidate to be readaptively and reused. I'm not too crazy in terms of the use of a washroom and a change room. But I would hope to be something different in terms of an interpretive facility. But yet, on the other hand, in terms of Mr. Bensal's comments, in terms of being able to utilize with plaques and information material in the building, I think it will lend itself quite well to it, because as a washroom and a change room, people will be coming in and out all the time. And at one of those occasions when you're leaving or coming in, you'll probably stop and look at the pictures and read what it says about it, that you'll probably get good exposure. So I think it doesn't sound like a great choice, but in the end, I think it'll be successful in terms of being visually utilized by the public and appreciated by the public in terms of another preservation in our community here in the area. So I'm prepared to support this quite easily.
Councillor Davey?
Yeah, I'm inclined to support as well. I think, on one hand, you could argue that we're spending, $700,000+ on this, but the reality is, if we're going to be building it anyway, I think the real story is that we're potentially saving $80,000 by reusing a building, whether it's heritage or not. That makes sense. And as well, there was the point made, I believe, by Councillor Fernandez that we won't see a lot of these materials going to a landfill. So I think this is as good a solution as we're ever going to get in a situation like this.
Councillor Fernandez, do you want to be last? Or? Yes, please. Okay. There's no one else in the queue, so I'll just quickly make my comments. I'm still concerned about the risk of moving the building, but staff have assured me that they've done all their due diligence that they need in order to make this recommendation, and so I'm okay on that part. I am surprised to see that the reuse of a building is actually coming in less than a new build. That actually surprises me. But at the end of the day, I think this will be a great asset for the park. And I think we have a unique opportunity to showcase this piece. And it'll be an opportunity where we can mesh the old with the new and really do something creative with it overall for the greatest impact that it can have on this park. This park is going to be seen by thousands of people every year. And so I think it's a good opportunity to reuse it. I too am not thrilled that it will end up being a washroom facility, but at the end of the day, that's what we need. And in order to make this complex overall function the way it needs to, I think this is the smart thing to do. So I am definitely in support of moving forward with this approach. Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks. I sort of expect that the comments around the use is probably a little disconcerting, but when I was in the Azores in September, we were in a very unique setting. It was a heritage site. It was a natural thermal pools, and one of the buildings that was being used was a heritage building, and it was used as a change room and shower facilities. But there was also a part of that building when people went in that told the story of those thermal pools. And so, and how the pioneers used to use them when the first people who colonized those islands, how they used it. So I think this is a really interesting and unique opportunity for us to do the same kind of thing. Heritage and storytelling is I mean, let's face it, how many times have we had a certain particular individual in our household spend way too much time in one of those washroom facilities? Who knows, what they're reading, but now we'll be able to read it on plaques, and people will be able to share those stories as they enter and in and out of that building and around that facility and around that park. So I think this is a very interesting way of using something that tells a story. So I strongly support this.
All right, there's no more comments. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously with those who are present. Thank you very much for doing the extra work on this. Really appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on to our last item, and that is traffic calming priority for roadways for 2018. And there is no presentation, just any questions for staff. And Barry Cronkite's here to answer questions. We will start with Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Galloway Sealock. The questions I have are on the list. When you look at number 1 being Sterling Ave and number 3 being West Ave, why are they being looked past?
Through you, Chair, there's a detailed explanation within the report. However, the main reason that we aren't proposing Sterling Avenue this year, which is priority or rank number 1, is that it has been identified for cycling facilities through the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program. So we would like to install those first before we go in and make any changes, physical changes for traffic calming, because that can impact how we can facilitate the cycling facilities themselves.
Okay. My second question is dealing with McGarry Drive. When was the last time you received a complaint about speeds on McGarry Drive?
McGarry Drive, through your chair, McGarry Drive is a street that we receive complaints, I would say periodically. It's a street that is known as a connection, let's say, for the neighborhood in terms of connecting from Fisher Hallman to the adjacent neighborhood, that being West Heights. But we do, from the residents on McGarry Drive in particular, we probably receive a handful annually.
Okay. So I do have a little bit of concern about that one because, to be honest, I haven't heard a single complaint on McGarry Drive in almost 7 years. So I'm just wondering, I'm thinking I'm going to make an amendment, but I'll if there's any other questions, I'll let the questions go.
Okay, Councillor Schneider.
I don't have a question. I'm just prepared to move this at the appropriate time and wanted to thank our staff. I've been involved in quite a few traffic calming meetings with them, and I get comments from citizens that were saying, I was expecting we were going to be told what was going to happen tonight, and I'm appreciative of how much they've listened and incorporated into their final plan. So happy to support this.
Councillor Unesky.
In regard to Sterling Avenues being ranked number 1, and you want to do the bicycle facility addition this year, the section that you refer to in the report is from Homer Watson to Highland, and the bicycling facility consideration would be for the same area, or it would be for a longer stretch? Because Sterling starts at Avalon, goes all the way out to King and further to the Odd. What area are you looking for the bicycling stuff?
Through you, Chair, Sterling Avenue, the entirety of Sterling Avenue from Homer Watson to King Street has been identified for on-street cycling facilities. So we will be looking at the entirety of Sterling Avenue holistically to make sure that when we do bring cycling facilities forward, that we're putting in the most appropriate facilities at that time.
I use Sterling Avenue South quite a bit in terms of going to where I'm going, and I find that Sterling Avenue from Mill to King is 4 lanes, and you've got ample room to work with, whereby from Mill down to Homer Watson, it's a narrow 2-lane, and by putting in bicycling facility, I'm just wondering whether you have enough room to do that.
Through the chair, without getting into too much detail, I can assure you that through the reconstruction of Sterling Avenue, we've identified that the cycling facilities through the narrower section that you're talking about can fit. We've also looked at the area with 4 lanes on Sterling, and there are some really unique opportunities there as well. So again, without getting into too much detail, we're very certain that we can make the cycling facilities fit appropriately.
So will those details come to council for consideration in any type of report or for information? Because I'm just wondering, without getting into details, but you sort of somehow have to, that portion from Mill to King, which is 4 lanes, will that 4 lanes still remain, or are you going to make it now 2 lanes? Like, I don't know. Is that going to be back to council?
Again, through the chair, without going through the full wholesome review for Sterling Avenue, I can't give you a clearer picture of what that might look like. We will do a detailed review of Sterling, and that will be presented to council, so you'll be made aware of what that looks like.
Okay. And on West Avenue, there's just consideration of a pedestrian crossing because there's a trail link that runs through there along the, I forget what it's called, not the Phil Singer, but what's the corridor called?
The tributary trail, I'm not sure of the name. It might be the Fall Singer Trail. I'm not entirely sure of the name.
Okay, but it's the same one. So, but there is a crossing there, but there's no, what I'm looking for, a median or an island? Is that what's intended to be installed in there as well?
Through the chair, the pedestrian crossover legislation that was approved by the province in 2016, I believe, is actually what we've identified here. So there's enough pedestrian volume and there's actually two locations because the Iron Horse Trail actually crosses in that area as well. So I believe, maybe not, but we've identified that to be installed. So we're working on a program to install those pedestrian crossovers, which in and of itself may limit an element of that speed that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. So that just to build on that question around Patricia Avenue, the pedestrian crossover that you're planning to install at the trail, is that officially part of your traffic calming study, or are you? I mean, wouldn't you want to put that in first and then measure and perhaps prioritize a different street first after?
Through the chair, with West Ave, because there's two locations that could potentially have the pedestrian crossover, that being the secondary trail and the Iron Horse Trail, that covers a major section of the street. So there's not as much space left from a speeding perspective in order for vehicles to pick up and slow down on West. Patricia is a little bit different with the one connection. The street is still fairly lengthy, and we still would expect to see higher rates of speed. So we do think that there's merit in conducting that traffic calming review. We will look at the pedestrian condition as part of that, and the PXO, if warranted, can be built into the overall plan, but as I said, there is still merit in reviewing this street in its entirety.
But we're looking at the street from Victoria to Highland, which is not the entirety of the length of the street, and I think that's the right section because that's the section that I know I've used and many people use to cross to get from Victoria to Highland or vice versa. And I'm trying to understand, again, that's just that little section. Why wouldn't we look at the impact of the pedestrian crossover before we look at that street? And you're telling us that you're looking at the whole street, but that's not what's identified in this map. Can you help me understand?
Yes, for clarity, when I refer to the whole street, I mean the whole street as proposed in the report in terms of that section from Victoria to Highland. In terms of distance, as you can see within the map that's on page 5-5, the trail connection is, we'll call it about 2/3 to 3/4 south of Victoria Street. So there is a significant area where, again, vehicles could pick up and slow down in terms of speed between Victoria Street and that trail connection. So again, there is that necessity to take a look at traffic calming at this time.
Okay, I thank you. I question but thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yes. So the project update under there, you've got Dune Village Road and Dune Mills Drive. I believe we would be talking about Dune Village Road from Homer Watson to Dune Mills. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, because I know we've been going through some stuff with the older Dune. Yes. So in case one of the residents on the older section of Dune Village Road reads this report, we might want to have clarification on that. some of the roads, Fallowfield, Parkvale, Sims Estates, are relatively, let's say, new roads, within the last 5 years to 8 years. And we do have some ongoing development, both in my ward, Councillor Seelock's ward, Councillor Davies' ward, and Councillor Schneider's ward. Are we starting to be a little bit more, I guess, forceful with developers and saying no more of these long, straight roads that encourage this kind of speeding? From now on, you've got to put in, if it's a long straight road, you've got to put in road narrowings, you've got to put in, proactive, so that we're not having to deal, we've got thousands of roads in this city, we'll be here till Kingdom Come to do traffic calming on all of them. But we need to be proactive, and I know that we're being proactive when we do a road reconstruction. Are we setting that stage with the development industry now?
Through you, Chair, we developed a policy, and it's subsequently been adopted in the city's development manual. That's exactly that. It's a proactive approach to traffic calming in new subdivisions. I believe that was approved by council in mid-2016. So since that time, any subdivision that has come forward in the last couple of years has exactly that.
Okay, and is it working? Are we seeing some of the? I haven't seen some of those in my ward, and some of those new streets have happened in the last couple of years. And
so we have to keep in mind that while the policy was approved in 2016, anything that would have been draft approved prior to that date wouldn't have been subject to this policy. So generally speaking, any road that this policy would have applied to isn't yet being constructed, but I can assure you that moving forward, you're going to see a very different design in the new subdivisions as they come on stream. It's hindsight, and it's unfortunate because I think, especially any roads that are going in front of schools or become the route to school, if they've been draft approved and we're not holding the developers' feet to the fire on this, we end up, and the taxpayers end up paying for it down, no pun intended, down the road for traffic calming. One other question I had was around Carindale, and it continues to be challenging. I just have a question around Old Chicopee Drive. Does that have a school on it as well, or is it a feeder to a school? I seem to think it is, but maybe the ward councillor is more knowledgeable than I am. I don't believe that there is a school directly on Old Chicopee, although it would be a street that would carry significant pedestrian volume given where it sits within the neighborhood, so it would have an indirect access to those schools, but not a direct access.
Okay. Yeah, because Carindale is, it's right in front of Brigadoon School. And I'm glad to see that it's at number 6, which gives me hope that something will happen in the next couple of years. But because it is, it's only given 56 points, is that because of the volume? Or, because 61 kilometers an hour at the 85th percentile is pretty darn fast when you've got kids crossing that road because parents are parking in the Carindale community to cross over Carindale Drive.
Through you, Chair, just quickly going through the chart now, as you can see, in terms of Carindale Drive specifically, it gets 28 points assigned for speed, which is considerable. It also gets 17 points for volume. Where it is lesser than the streets that are above it on the priority is with regard to collisions. So along Carindale Drive, while I can appreciate that we've dealt with a number of concerns, one of the concerns that hasn't really been there is a collision history. So in terms of looking at the warrant in its entirety, that's where it falls further down the list.
So these would be reported collisions, right?
That's correct.
So any collisions that might be with a tree, which has happened at the bottom of Carindale a couple of times, would not necessarily maybe be reported. These people may just say, I know that I've been speeding. So that does skew the number a little bit, though, doesn't it?
Through you, Chair, while I can appreciate that there may be instances that aren't reported to the police, that's a consistency that, generally speaking, occurs across the board. You have to keep in mind that these other streets that do have a higher point threshold when it comes to collisions are having that exact same scenario. So it's still an apples-to-apples comparison, if you
Right.
will.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may just comment quickly on one of your questions with respect to in newer subdivisions, I live in a subdivision that, even though the policy wasn't in place, they put in medians, they narrowed the roadway, and I still get ample complaints about that. So the proactive traffic calming measures will go in place now, but it doesn't, some of it's not deterring certain behaviors behind the wheel of a vehicle. So while there's hope, it still comes back to driver operating the vehicle. Councillor Davey, question?
Yes, thank you, Ed. And if you'll permit it, Chair, just I know it's not directly related to this, but and I don't want to go down the road, but I'm just curious. I recall some legislation about letting municipalities have photo radar. Is that something that staff is going to be looking at? And sorry, first of all, is that true? Second of all, is staff looking at it?
Through the chair, first of all, it is true. So in terms of the program itself, there's some details to iron out, but it is part of the city's overall business plan for 2018-2019.
Okay, thank you.
I have just one question with respect to the project updates. I didn't see David Berge Drive there. I know we had bike lane, no bike lane, we're moving forward. So where is that one?
Through the chair, so the project update that you see in front of you is a list of streets that will be physically constructed in 2018.
Okay.
David Berge Drive, because we had the cycling issue that we dealt with, we haven't formally started that review yet, so our intent is to formally start that review in the spring, which would put construction off into 2019.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reedman, did you want to add something?
Through the chair, it's also tracked on page IF 1-1 on the unfinished business lists.
Oh, perfect. I might not have turned to the last page. There it is, thank you. All right, there are no more questions. Councillor Ioannidis, I understand that you want to make an amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, Galloway Seelock, thank you. I'd like to make an amendment that we push out McGarry Drive at least a year. And I would say with Councillor Fernandez's concerns with Carindale Drive, would recommend that one move up since it's right there on the list. And being that it is a school zone, and the reason why I'm looking at McGarry Drive is because to me I think it needs in 7-8 years that even when my campaigning I really didn't hear that much about McGarry Drive, and with my experience on McGarry Drive as well, I don't see the speeding, Liz, and even when you look at the speeding, I know technically it's at 40, but it's at 57. To me, that's still a relatively not really a fast speed on that road. And because it's such a major road into the ward, I would want to, have greater discussions on that before moving forward with this one. So I recommend moving Carindale and just pushing McGarry Drive back another year.
Okay, I can take that amendment. Is there any other comments that anybody wants to make? All right, with that we will start with the amendment. So the amendment is to swap out McGarry Drive for Carindale. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. And the main motion then? Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. I don't know if I have to do that again, do I? We're all good? Okay. Sorry? Yeah, Councillor Fernandez?
I just wanted to thank my colleague for taking a look at a street that has a school on it and considering that, upping that through the traffic calming review. I think that is extremely insightful and very considerate. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will adjourn. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.